So welcome everybody. My name is Mike Chenoweth, and welcome to today's shared workshop session number 1. And what we're talking about today is the importance of using completion tracking and restricted access, and how that relates to student retention. And also, one other thing I should mention here is, again, just welcome to our shared workshops. This is an initiative that we're taking here at Open LMS to provide continuing education for Open LMS to help you all understand how to, some of these features that might not be features that you use that often. So we're going to be presenting these shared workshops throughout the year to again, just as kind of, you can think of it as continuing education within Open LMS. We know that you all have access to our support portal, and you can reach out to our support team when you have questions. But again, we want to take things a step further and start working with you directly on these workshops to provide you with some tools and details into some features that again you might not be familiar with. I've been working in e-learning for the past 10 years, the past 5 years specifically with Open LMS as a technical consultant. So again, I'm looking forward to talking with you guys today to talk about this learning design strategies for student retention. So navigating to the next slide here, we can see just a brief agenda that we'll be talking about during this presentation. So I'm specifically going to be talking about the importance of using completion tracking and restricted access in your courses. And you might ask, how exactly does this play into student retention? You can see designing your course for student retention. Why is activity completion important? Why is restricted access important? And then why is course completion tracking important? What we like to say is, the general idea here is the more a student is engaged in the course, the more likely they are to enjoy it. There's been a lot of research and testing done that we've seen this. The idea is that completion tracking and restricted access are two tools that you can use to set up a great online course. With that being said, that kind of takes me to the next slide here and talking about designing your course with a purpose. So again, it's important to think about how you're creating a course before you actually begin creating activities in it. I've worked with some institutions that if they're not familiar with the learning management systems, they might start into creating a course and just creating some activities, which definitely works. But once you actually have an idea for a course, you definitely want to kind of step back and before you start creating courses or creating activities such as quizzes and uploading videos and things like that, you definitely want to design it with a purpose. And what exactly do I mean by that is the first thing we want to talk about here is the ease of understanding matters. What I mean by that is if you have a great course, or if you have a course with great content, but it's not easy to navigate and students can't follow along, there's a good chance that they might lose interest and might not be too engaged in that course. So when we talk about easing the ease of understanding matters, there's 4 specific topics that I want to talk about here in terms of general info, purpose of training, methodology, and calendar. When we're talking about general info, this includes details about tools that they'll be using in the course and how to track their progress. Again, I think that's important to have, as you can see in my screenshot here, a course introduction that gives the students an idea of, okay, I've registered for this course, I've accessed this introduction area, but what is this course about? What type of tools will I be using, and will I be able to track my progress throughout this course? I think that's important in an online course when students will be logging into the course at all hours of the day. They might be jumping from the course to something that they're doing at home and back to the course. You don't want them to lose track on what they've done previously, and I think activity completion plays a large part in that. Purpose of training. So the general idea there is thinking about learning goals to be achieved. So again, the more information we can provide to the students earlier on about the tools that they're using, the activities they'll be completing, I think the better. Methodology. So the general idea is, what types of activities will be used in the course. You can always make a quick reference that throughout this course, you'll be working with quizzes and assignments, and you'll be watching videos. And again, we'll go into a lot more detail about how this plays into the idea of completion tracking and restricted access. And then just a brief note about calendar. It's nice to inform students when activities will be carried out. I know this doesn't really relate a whole lot to specifically completion tracking, or it may look like it doesn't at the moment. But in terms of the restrict access feature, the calendar actually plays a big part into that. So any questions with this first slide here in terms of ease of understanding matters? And again, feel free to add details to the chat down there in the lower right-hand corner. So the next details that I want to talk about is designing your course with a purpose. So again, keeping the idea of the student in mind and thinking about, we want the students to be able to understand the flow of the course. Again, in terms of student retention, if you introduce a new student to your site and they access a course and it's something that they're not able to easily navigate, and they're not sure what's been completed, what's not been completed, it might disengage them, and they might say, you know what, maybe online learning is not for me because I'm really not grasping, I'm not understanding what I'm doing, and it just doesn't feel like there's a good flow here. So I think the quality of the course design really matters a lot. In terms of the course structure, the most common way to organize a course is by topics. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with when you create a course within OpenLMS, there's a number of options. The topics option works really well. And again, I'll show you in more detail in the demo portion of this training how the topics, how you can view completion progress within the topics there. Course flow, again, I've mentioned this a couple times already, but a disorganized course can be frustrating and can cause users to tune out. So you definitely want to have a nice course flow. And again, I'll show you an example of 2 courses in my Sandbox site during the demo portion and kind of give you an idea of what exactly we're looking at. And then usability. So the course elements need to be laid out in an intuitive manner. So again, anybody can go in and create a course and add activities and resources, but if the table of contents isn't set up properly, if it's not, if the flow isn't working well, and you're not required to use restrict access, but I think if you do, it kind of provides the learner with a better idea of what your expectations are for them over the course of a certain time period. So getting into the next slide here, so you might say, okay, we're a couple slides in, we haven't talked specifically about completion tracking or restrict access yet, right? So here comes the fun stuff. So why is activity completion important? So we have a couple screenshots here, but the general idea of activity completion is it serves as a visual reminder to the student what they've already completed, and it gives them a sense of accomplishment. So again, I think that's really important in online learning because when you're in a face-to-face course and you complete you go into the course and the instructor will hand a paper test, and you might complete that test in the course. You get a sense of accomplishment there. But in terms of if you complete a quiz online, you will get that sense of accomplishment. But if you're able to see by way of activity completion what I've completed, I think that really goes a long way for a person to say, okay, you know what, I've completed half this course. I'm feeling really good about this. Not to mention, it can easily show what they still have to do. So they can plan out and say, okay, I see I've completed about a third of the course. I still have a ways to go here. Or, you know what, I've completed about 95% of the course. I feel really good about this. I've been really engaged in this course. I like this a lot. A little note about activity completion is make sure that activity completion is set up correctly in the course before the course begins. And what I mean by that is, for those of you that might be familiar with it, that have already used activity completion, once students start completing activities in the course, the settings will lock in those activities, and you can only alter that by unlocking and losing all that previous data. And again, we'll go into more detail during the demo portion here. So that's from the student perspective. From a teacher perspective, I think activity completion is really important because it helps the instructor know if a student is isn't completing their activities. And again, that might be something where an instructor could say, you know what, I see that Bobby Smith or Julie Smith hasn't completed a lot of activities. It seems like they're really not engaged at the moment. We need to reach out to that person. So in terms of student retention, I, as the instructor, can reach out to that person and say, hey, Bobby, hey, Julie, is there a reason why you haven't completed X, Y, or Z activities? And you can start that conversation and help them kind of, get over that issue that they've been having. Another advantage in terms of activity completion, for those of you that might not be familiar with it, is, in my opinion, it's a step up from the grade book. And you might say, what exactly do you mean there? So everybody knows that you can go out to the grade book and you can look at the grader report and you can see who's completed what by way of, achieving certain grades, and you can see the course total, right? With activity completion, I think it really takes things to the next level, because in addition to tracking graded activities, activity completion can track who has viewed a certain page resource, who has downloaded a certain file. So again, I think the activity completion really takes it a step further for the instructor, because they're able to say, in addition to just that grade that Bobby or Julie has received in the course, I can also see, are they only completing the quizzes, or are they looking at the documentation that we're asking them to look at to learn more about, some of these learning activities that they might not be familiar with. So again, I think activity completion is a really important tool, and I think when used properly, I think it can be a great resource for students and for the instructors alike. Any questions or comments about the activity completion there? And I've seen a couple other people join, during this presentation. Welcome, everybody. We are in the presentation portion of the shared workshop. I will be doing a demo portion a little bit later here too, but I just wanted to welcome everybody here who has been joining. One note, just for those of you who have joined a little bit later, we will be recording this session, so if you've missed out on some of this, we will have this recording available at a later time. So again, yeah, hi Miles. Oh yeah, no worries. Yeah. And those of you, again, others that have joined, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to add those into the chat. I have a couple of colleagues that are in the chat to help me answer some of those questions. So very informal call that we're having here. My goal is to interact with you all and answer any questions that you have, and provide you with a little bit more detail. So again, feel free to speak up at any time. You can turn on your microphone. You can make a chat in the chat area there. So yeah. So in terms of restrict access, restrict access and student retention. So again, this goes back to the course flow that I talked about a couple slides ago. If you create a course where a student has to complete one activity to get to the next, they won't be able to jump around and get lost. Again, it's not required by any means to use restrict access. And in some cases, you might not even need to use it if you have a course that doesn't have too many sections. But again, if you have a course that has 10 or 12 topics, and you want a student to follow a certain path, and you want them to have a nice flow throughout the course, I think the restrict access goes a long way to setting up that course and setting the expectations for the student. And again, I'll show you a demo, and I'll log in as a student and log in as an instructor to kind of give you a visual of what I would see as a student, and how setting those expectations with restrict access will really give me a nice introduction into the course, and I'll be able to know, okay, this is what the instructor wants me to complete in these first couple of weeks. And although there's 12 topics, and that seems like a lot to me at the moment, I don't have to worry about those 8 other topics for a while. And yeah, so Summer, thanks for the mention here. So we use it to get students to complete the enrollment assignment. They can't access week 1 or 2 until the enrollment quiz is completed, and that's a great idea, Summer. I think that's one of the best ways I think that to use it. There is really to get them introduced into into the course by way of that enrollment assignment, and then right, giving them access to week 1 and week 2 once that quiz is completed. So yeah, great. Thank you. And then in terms of stepping back from activity completion and restrict access for a moment, I want to just make a brief note about course completion tracking. We're not going to be talking a whole lot about course completion tracking, but just in terms of the general overall progress that a student makes throughout the course. I just want to make a brief note about course completion tracking. So course completion tracking, in my opinion, takes the activity completion a step further, but in a different direction. For those of you that may or may not have used course completion tracking, with course completion tracking, rather than saying, like activity completion, where you can say, a student must view this page resource to complete it, or a student post a message in a forum to make that activity completed. Rather than saying, okay, the student must complete all of the activities in the course, you might say, for course completion tracking, I'm only going to focus on the graded activities here. So that's the advantage that the course completion tracking provides, is the ability to say, okay, we understand at the granular level in each topic, the student can see, for example, that there's 36 activities and I've completed 34 of them. But what exactly does that mean about my grade in the course, and how close I am to completing the course? This course completion piece, I think, is a nice feature that you can use to show the progress a student is making based on specific criteria. And let me just take a look at your comment, Summer. So, struggling to get students to complete the enrollment quiz. Teachers spend way too much time calling students just to get them to do that one thing. It's really helped our census data. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. We've had a couple of different issues with completion tracking. Okay, Miles, and again, we can talk about that, throughout the call. I was just going to mention that, Andy. I think the PLD it would be a useful tool for reminders, and that goes hand in hand with next week's the session 2 of the workshop, which is where we'll be talking about PLD. So yeah, great segue into next week's session, Summer. Miles, in terms of the different issues that you guys have been having, when you say different issues, do you mean like errors that you're having with the site, or more of just understanding how exactly to use completion tracking? Yeah, Miles, yeah. Raise your hand there. Feel free to turn on your microphone and yeah. Oh, let's see that here. Oh, and apologies. Let's see. So there. Let's see. You should have had the option. Apologies that wasn't. Let's see. Notification.
Oh, there we go. Hi, can you guys hear me? Oh,
Perfect.
cool.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
hey. So a couple of issues we've had. One issue with completion tracking is somebody will have a couple of people building a course, and then they'll decide to add something after some people have already completed it, and then they'll have that marked, and then all of a sudden we get tons of support being like, what? Now it says I didn't complete it. So that's one thing, which I know that's easy to solve with the announcement or something, like check out this new document, or just not making sure it's not set to completion. Another issue we had is we had a questionnaire in the student technology course where it never we have support ticket in based on it. I can't remember all the details, but for some reason the completion tracking doesn't work with it at all. Like you complete the survey and it doesn't get marked as complete.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, and we can definitely. I can make a follow up with my team. I work, directly with the support team often. So, yeah, I'm not familiar with, and I'm not sure if Andy. It looks like he has something to add here. So, yeah.
If that survey is set up to be anonymous,
Yes, it is.
then yeah, completion tracking won't work.
Oh, there we go.
It used to have a message that would come up that would say that, but I think that through some iterations of change that did lost that. But because the system is trying desperately to honor and respect the anonymity, it won't flag completion so that I can't connect the dots between, oh well, look, you completed that survey at 4 o'clock because you got the award at 4 o'clock and there's the 4 o'clock submission. So yeah,
That totally makes sense.
I'll take a note to see if we can figure out a way to make it a little more obvious that that's what it's doing now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Miles. Thanks for participating there. Yep. Yeah, that's good to know. Any other questions or comments? Just about how you've been using it. This is I'll be jumping into the demo portion here in a moment, so have a little bit more hands-on. But yeah, any other questions or comments about anything in the slides here so far? Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like at the moment there's not. So let me stop my sharing there. And I'm going to start up I'm going to screen share and go into my my demo environment here. So there we go. So can everybody see my screen here? And welcome to my sandbox site here, Open LMS New Instructors. Perfect. Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. So again, yeah, welcome to my demo environment here. I'm logged in here as a teacher, so just to kind of give you an idea of kind of what we've talked about here. So again, I'm going to go into details. We gave a brief overview of why activity completion and restrict access is important. Now, what I want to do is I want to take a look at the actual tools themselves. So again, some of you may or may not be familiar with some of these, but again, whether it's at the activity level or even at the section level, you can set activity completion and restrict access at these levels. So, for example, looking at the page resource here, when I go to what to expect here, and if I click on the pencil icon here, you can see that there you can see restrict access and activity completion. So, first thing I want to focus on here is just activity completion and kind of show you guys some of the things that I've already talked about in the presentation here, but just to give you a little bit more of a visual. So, Miles, exactly what you had mentioned here. So I had mentioned this previously in the slides that it is important to, prior to enrolling the students in the course, make sure that activity completion is set up, because like you'd mentioned, if it's not set up prior to the students actually accessing the content, you get to this point to where people have already completed it. And if you unlock these activity completion options, which I'm going to do here just because this is a test course, you're going to lose that activity completion that's already been completed by the other students. So just something to keep in mind there. But one thing I always like to mention about activity completion is the default options here. So in terms of completion tracking, you have the option of students can manually mark the activity completed. So let me back up for a moment. You guys are probably all familiar with the idea that when you go into a course and you create a brand new course, there's a completion tracking section here. If completion tracking is set to yes, you will have the ability to go into quizzes, file uploads, and all of those other resources and set the activity completion at each level. If this is set to no, then that option makes it you're unable to use that completion tracking at that course or at the activity level. Going back into the course itself and looking at a specific activity, again, some of the activity completion varies, whether it's a graded resource or an ungraded resource, but just looking, for example, at the ungraded resource, this page resource, for example, if I go down to activity completion, and again, I'll unlock this completion options here. The default option is always show activity as complete. Show that, I'm sorry, students can manually mark the activity as completed. That's always the default option when you create a brand new assignment. I always like to take it a step further and say, in my opinion, take the extra step when you're creating activities and set it to show activity is complete when conditions are met. The reason why I think that's important is in terms of, you know, students accessing a course and them navigating through content, if you have it to set to students can manually mark the activities complete, well, we're putting the onus on the student to actually click on that activity, and then I'm going to jump to an area here to my sandbox site and enrolled in as a student here. If I come into this section, even if I viewed one of these activities, I would have to click on this check mark to say that I had completed it. If it was set to students can manually mark the activity as completed. So I always like to take it a step further and say, okay, let's show activity as complete when conditions are met. And again, for this page content, you only have the option of students must view this activity to complete it. If this were a graded activity such as a quiz, you would have the ability to choose that option. But again, I think this really, this is really important to not make the student have to go through an extra step while they're doing their learning to say, okay, well, why does it show that I've only completed, you know, 1 out of 6 activities when you know I have completed those other activities? I think you can avoid some confusion if you take this extra step for that. And then you can also take it a step further and say, okay, expected completion. That isn't necessarily anything that the student would see, but it's something to know that you can have for those settings. So that's again for a resource that isn't graded. Now, if I go down into, for example, this activities and assessments area, and if I scroll all the way down to this quiz activity, if I click on the pencil icon next to this quiz activity, and I scroll down to activity completion, you can see that, again, students can, and I've changed this one. This is a course that I had changed previously, but initially when you create a quiz, it's set to students can manually mark the activities completed. You know, and what you can see here, again, with a quiz, if I complete a quiz and it was set like this, it would show up, the score would still show up in the grade book, but from an activity completion perspective, the student would not show that they completed it. And from the instructor perspective, in terms of looking at that activity completion, they wouldn't know that they completed it by looking at the activity completion report. So if I take it a step further in setting up this activity and say, show activity as complete when conditions are met, I can say, okay, require view. Do I want to require view in addition to a require grade? And or, you know, maybe we require a passing grade. Which is, you guys are probably familiar with the idea that in the grade section you can say grade to pass. So maybe I say grade to pass for this is 85, and students must require a passing grade. So students must receive a grade to complete this activity. Oh, and by the way, that grade needs to be a passing grade. It can't only be, you know, a 50% in this. So again, in terms of graded activity, that I really think that the activity completion, you can really get detailed and make sure that you can set this up so it really captures exactly what you're looking to know when a student completes an activity. Any questions or comments about the general idea between the manual options and showing activity as complete when conditions met?
Real quick, can you change that default students can mark the activity as completed to so that if something like just a PDF is added that it would default to do not indicate activity completion. Because
Right.
we might have people adding things that aren't aware that activity completion is defaulted to that. So is there a way to change that default or no?
So if you have completion tracking set at the course level, if you have it set to yes,
Yeah.
it should default to students can manually mark the activity as completed.
Right.
It shouldn't default to that do not indicate activity completion. There
Right.
isn't a way to make it though that the default is show activity is complete when conditions are met. And I think the general idea there is because it does vary from whether it's a great activity or not.
Totally. I would prefer it say it default to do not indicate activity completion, because then it forces the person that
Oh,
added it
what
to
you're saying.
decide.
So you're asking, can you default it to do not indicate
Yeah.
completion?
Right.
So yeah, actually at the site level, we should be able to, if I go down to site administration and advanced features here, and I'll jump out of this course for a moment. So use completion tracking. So enable completion tracking is, this is where we turn it on at the site level. You guys are probably familiar with that, but you can see use completion tracking. You can set it here. If you set this to do not indicate activity completion, yeah. If you set it there, now keep in mind that that is at a course-wide, or I should say site-wide level. So every single course, so you want the instructors to know that for those that do want to use activity completion, they're going to have to take that step further. So
sounds good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Carrie, I think the activity completion report is fantastic. Can the students view their own activity completion in this type of summary? When you say in this type of summary, do you mean? Well, let me go. That's kind of a good segue into the next area that I wanted to talk about in terms of activity completion. So let me go back into that course here, and I wanted to talk about the idea of, okay, we've set up activity completion. What exactly does this mean for the instructors? And then I'm into the student view here in a moment. So if I go into course administration, reports, and I go to activity completion, this tool, I think, and I've mentioned this a little bit during the presentation here, I think this tool goes a long way to help an instructor know, from a quick perspective of a one-stop shop, how engaging is the course? How well are you engaging with the students? Again, I made a mention of the idea that you can always use the gradebook, right? The instructor can go into the gradebook and see who's completed what by way of grades and the course total. But if you have quite a few resources and you want to know, again, are the students engaging in those resources and those videos that you want them to watch? I think this activity completion takes that a step further, because you can see for anybody that's enrolled in this course on the left-hand side, and then all of the activities. And again, different from the gradebook, this includes page resources, PDFs, in addition to graded activities too. But I could say, and again, I'll address the student view in a moment, but I could say from an instructor perspective, I come into this course and I can say, okay, you know what, if this were my course and it's nearing the second half of this course, I'd say, wow, things aren't going well. The students, I only have one student that is accessing the page resources. Everybody's completing the quizzes, but they're not accessing the PDFs and other resources. And that way, and you can say as an instructor, well, maybe you have send an email or reach out to the students in a manner to say, you know what, there are a number of resources that we want you guys to view. Please keep in mind, this. But the general idea here is you have this tool to know how engaging the students are in those non-graded activities. Any questions or comments about this activity completion report from the instructor perspective? And again, yeah, great question, Summer, Carrie, in terms of how can students view their own activity completion. So let me go out to this is my Sandbox course, and I'm enrolled as a student. So I have a number of things in play here in terms of activity completion and restrict access, but From a student perspective, there's a couple ways. So when I log into my site and I go to my courses, if you are using the Snap theme, activity completion really, Snap works really well with activity completion from the idea of exactly here in the course cards. You can see I'm enrolled into 2 courses right now as my student. The first course has 18 activities. The second course has 32. Now, again, we don't want to confuse this with grade progress. The students will always be able to go into the course dashboard and know what their grades are. But in terms of activity completion, what have I completed? I, as a student, can come in here and say, okay, in my interactive online Snap course, I'm a third of the way through. I've completed 6 out of 18 activities. And then in my Open LMS New Instructors course, I've completed 4 out of 32. Again, this just a little bit of a brief introduction. You might say, Carrie, well, that might cause concern to the students because 4 out of 32, I'm only 13% completed. You know, have I fallen behind? That's where I want to take the student view of activity completion a step further. I'm going to go into the course now, and now I can see, okay, I've only completed 4 out of 32, but by the way, I've completed 2 first 2, and I have a check mark here. So the course introduction, next steps, I'm done with that area. The themes and navigation, I've completed 2 out of 3 activities there. So again, I feel like I'm making some good progress. So, you know, they see the initial overall view in my courses area, but once they get into the table of contents, they can see, okay, I'm really not, I haven't fallen behind anywhere. I'm actually on track. And then you might say this, and again, this will lead me into restrict access here in a little bit here, but when I go into content and resources, I'm going to come here and I might say, well, you know, why don't I see the other activities I can complete? Oh, by the way, it's not available until July 21st, and today's July 15th. So let me stop for a moment. I know I mentioned a lot there. Carrie, does that kind of help answer your question, give you an idea on the course progress that they can see using activity completion? Perfect. Good. Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Does topic layout, is it the same in weekly? If you're in the weekly layout, is the display the same for the table of contents with the check mark and all that stuff? Because I don't think I've ever used it for a weekly.
Yeah, with the check mark, I'm not sure about if it will show. I know the weekly does a little bit different in terms of, you know, with the current week. So and let me see here, Andy. Yeah, so if you use the course completion block, they can see a report on themselves there. So yeah, Andy, that's a great point there too. Yep. So yeah, and I was going to get into the course completion here in a little bit here, and I can actually jump to that for a moment, and then I'll get back to you, Miles. So if I go into course tools here, you can see the course completion status. So this goes into a little bit of detail about the course completion I talked about earlier. But you can show, for example, if you just wanted to show course completion status and you wanted to have, you set up the criteria for all activities, they could see all activities here, you know, listed out there. So yes, there are ways to do that. And Carrie, I'll actually send a follow-up. I'll add that to my follow-up details about, you know, providing a little bit more detail into that course completion block. Because I agree, I like that general overall, you know, view from the student or from the instructor. If I was able to view that as a student, I think that'd be really important. One thing I will show here is show the progress here, that 13%. Again, that's what we saw here in this section. So. Yeah, they're named a little bit differently in the plugin. So when you add them to a course, I know I've kind of noticed that. I've noticed that recently too. Yeah, it might be at the site level too. Yeah. So, but yeah, I'll follow up on follow-up email into that a little bit further, and if necessary, we can always have a call to talk about that too, Carrie. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So going back to your comment there, Miles, and can you go into a little bit more detail again about?
Yeah, so I noticed you're in a topic format, and that's what we've always used for
Right.
courses since they're asynchronous and the completion tracking is really important. But generally for weekly, I don't know of any that we use completion tracking for. There might be some. I was just wondering if it appeared any differently in the table of contents, the way the check mark is displayed
Yeah.
with
So
2 of
actually,
2 next to it.
let me do this here. Just we're in this course. I'm enrolled as a student. Let's take a look at it and see what happens. So I'm going to change this to weekly format here, and let's go ahead and save and return. So well, and then now that I think about it, yeah. So it's because I've edited the sections. It's not going to show that. But one thing I will see here is. Yeah, so let's see. Let's go back here. At first glance, it appears that it should, even if because it is still weekly. So let me do a follow up on that, Miles, just to confirm. But it appears at first glance. Again, I'd like to do a little bit more thorough testing. But yeah, it looks like it should.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So let me go back and change this back to a topics format here for a moment. Okay. So again, that's the main details that I want to talk about with activity completion. Again, thank you for your questions. I think that definitely had some good questions and comments there. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of restrict access and how that plays into things here. So again, the general idea of restrict access is the ability to provide a good flow of the course. So if I'm a student and I log into this course, again, if I'm looking at my progress in this course and I say, I'm 4 out of 32, that I'm a little concerned with that. Now, when you actually get into the course, you can see that there's some conditional details here. The idea of restrict access is that if you, and the way it plays into student retention is if you're able to set up a course with restrict access and a student can understand this is section 1, this is section 2, and even without it being labeled that, so you can see this isn't labeled section 1, section 2, section 3. So if restrict access wasn't in place, I might be able to jump around in a course, and some instructors might be okay with that. Other instructors might say, you know what, we want to have a specific area where students go to so they don't get lost. And I think using that restrict access is a nice way to do this. By saying, this core production area and next steps, I can come in here and I can follow along. But when I get into content and resources, oh, by the way, again, that's not available until July 21st. So when you go back in as the instructor, restrict access can be used at the section level. So if I go into edit section, you can see I can say, okay, what are the ways that I can use restrict access? I can set it, I've already set it at the date level, but there are a number of other restrictions. So if I go to add restriction, you can also add restrictions on activity completion, grade, user profile, release code, and restriction set. So that release code and restriction set are a little bit more advanced, and we're not going to go into those specific details at the moment. But you can see it comes back to some of the other pieces that we've talked about, like activity completion already, where you can say, I want to make sure that if a student has to access a certain, if we don't want them to access this section until they've completed a certain activity, we can set it up for activity completion. So again, these are all the restrict access features that you do have available. It's set, you can set it at the activity or at the section level here. But now if I go into a certain activity, for example, for example, this quiz activity here. And let's say I don't want the quiz activity to be accessed until, the example lesson's been viewed, or a number of other activities have been viewed. I can go into that quiz activity here and go to restrict access. And by default, I said, okay, again, this was already set up. I said activity completion, the adding activities must be marked as completed. So that's a good first step. But let's say, again, I want to make it a little bit more advanced, and I don't want the student to just to have to, only view one thing. I want them to view a couple other activities. So I'm going to say, with add restriction, let's do activity completion on another activity. So I'm going to say, we want them to view this example lesson, must be marked as completed. But in addition, we want them to receive a grade in a quiz, in another quiz. So I'm going to say the quiz on content resources must be completed with an 80%. So again, taking things a step further with restrict access, you can make it very simple and say, you can't access a certain activity until the previous one's been completed. But you can really get detailed and say, okay, you know what? This quiz is one that we really want our students to, we want our students to review the resources prior to taking this quiz. So I'm going to set up a number of restrict access features here. When I do that, and if I go back to save and return to course, then that puts those restrict access features in place. So now when I get to that section as a student, and if I want to access that, that lock will appear for them. And when I hover over that lock as a student, I'll see that I must complete those other activities. So let me go back up here for a moment. I'm actually going to remove this restriction just to give you guys an idea. And let me set this to, I'll just say July 14th for the activities and assessments. And just to give you a visual of what the student sees here, I'm going to refresh my screen here and go to activities and assessments. And you might say, okay, I'm going to go through each of these sections. And just to show you, kind of give you a little bit of a demo of how restrict access works with some of these, if I click read more with this page resource, you can see that green check mark just popped right up. So again, I think that's a nice little feature that even with page resources, as I expand that out, it's showing me that it's showing the instructor and myself that I've completed this. Again, people can, they don't have to, view everything here, but the hope is that if they've expanded this, they're going to read that. But if I come down and let's say I want to jump through and I say I want to take this quiz, I can't click on the quiz name. And the reason being is because we have the restrict access in place. So again, I might say, well, what do I have to do next? I feel like it's fairly intuitive that I click on this lock and it says, oh, adding activities must be completed, example lesson must be completed. Oh, and by the way, I have to take that quiz on content and resources, and I haven't completed that yet. So again, I feel like it provides a good flow for the student to know, okay, I've completed X, Y, and Z, but if I want to get to this quiz, I still have to review these other resources. So again, I think that restrict access really helps. Going back to kind of the presentation and what I talked about with design flow, it helps the students stay engaged. It helps them to be able to follow the course in a certain manner, rather than being able to jump around. Again, going to the idea that I talked about earlier about if a course wasn't set up with a restrict access, again, it's not required, but let's say I go into this other course that I have, Mike's Interactive Online Snap course. And let's say I don't have activity completion turned on, nor do I have restrict access turned on. I actually have activity completion turned on in this course, as you can see, but if I didn't, the progress bar wouldn't be there. So this would be a course that would have no progress, and I could actually go into any content I want in this course. If I didn't have those pieces in place, and let's say I was a student and I navigated through this course and I clicked on a certain section, for example, the sample PDF, and I read those resources and I posted in the forum. When I came back to this course, if that activity completion isn't in place, I'm going to have some trouble to know what I've completed here. So again, from a student perspective and retention, if you provide that progress to them, they're able to see, okay, that's right, I did go into this course a week and a half ago before I went on vacation, and now I remember I went through and I completed X, Y, and Z. I have to start off from here. So again, it keeps the student engaged. They're not able to fall behind or get unorganized to say, okay, you know what, maybe I have to reach out to the instructor, and then it just hampers that learning process because at this point they're disengaged because they don't know what they've completed a week and a half ago. And then on the topic of restrict access, again, and neither of these are required. We're just kind of providing, some principles here. But on the idea of restrict access, you can look at this and say, that previous course is set up to restrict access, so I can only access those first two sections, and I know that I'm not expected to complete the other ones. If I were to go into this course as a student, I might say, well, I haven't had too much interaction with the instructor. I wonder what they want me to complete. Well, maybe I'll go into one and I'm going to complete as much as I can, as fast as I can, because I'm not sure. And again, that might not be a good learning methodology for that student because it might be that the instructor wants them to take their time through the course, but without that restrict access in place, the student doesn't know and they can just jump around as much as they want. Again, I think that restrict access plays an important part to really give a good understanding to a student, setting the expectations, what process should I follow throughout this course. So again, let me stop for a moment. I know I've mentioned a lot here. I've been talking a bit. Any questions or comments in terms of just the idea of, seeing activity completion on and off in these courses and restrict access and what exactly that means? Do you guys have any questions or comments at the moment? Yeah, Miles? Yeah.
Follow-up question, restrict access with anonymous surveys, same issue where it doesn't know that the specific person that completed it. So, okay.
Sure. Yeah, no, definitely. We'll add that. Sure. Yeah. And I think it's the same idea with the questionnaire. So yeah, we'll definitely look into that and see. Again, there might be some workaround that some other folks that we worked with might have an idea on that. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Any other questions or comments at the moment here? And I'm not hearing anything at the moment, so that's good. Again, yeah, thank you for the participation here. The next thing I want to do is let me go back to my slides here, and we have a little bit of interactive part of this workshop here. So let me go back to my slides and navigate to what we're calling our in-session practice assignment. So this is just a little scenario that we put together. In the emails, you guys might have seen that we encourage you guys to have access to your sandbox if available. So for those of you that have access to this, this is a good time to kind of log in if you're in there right now. But I just want to take about 5 or 10 minutes to we'll talk about the scenario for a moment and let you guys take about 5 or 10 minutes to kind of think about what you would do. Again, this is a very simple scenario, but the general idea here is, Mike, as an instructor, I have a certificate that I want a student to receive at the end of the course, but I don't want the student to skip out on reading a PDF and taking a quiz to get a passing grade. How can I ensure that the student has met these requirements before they download that certificate? So in your sandbox site, can you take a moment or a couple minutes to kind of set that up, and we can kind of talk about how you did that and answer any questions that you guys had?
we have our own sandbox site on the train.mile or on our own instance?
In your own sandbox site, yeah.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Using their miles, yeah,
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 all
yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
no
And
problem, got it.
yeah, for those of you that might not have your sandbox site available, yeah, feel free to, we can kind of, just take some time to, if you want to write it down for a minute. The general idea of this practice assignment is just to get you guys thinking about, the steps that we've already talked about and how to use, activity completion and restrict access. So yeah, so again, we'll give you guys a couple minutes to kind of think about setting that up, and we'll take a moment here. And again, just while you guys are doing that, I think this is a good time just to note again, this should work. This is the first workshop that we're doing. We will be presenting a number of workshops throughout the year, and this is an initiative that we're going to continue to move forward with. So please continue to visit our open community, and we've been posting some information in the community about that's either where you guys found the registration link. Some of you guys might have registered via the Open LMS community. Some of you might have registered from the invite via email. But again, this is the first of many sessions that we're going to be doing that. Hopefully you guys feel that this has been helpful here. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about is just the idea of course completion. So let me go back and go into my instructor course here. Actually, here we go. So again, the idea of overall course completion, again, I just wanted to send a brief mention about this, about where this exists, and if some of you guys use it, and if some of you guys don't. To be honest, I don't see the course completion, just initially, I don't see as many people using it when I first start working with newer clients. A lot of them focus on the activity completion first, but for course completion, if you go into course administration, you can see course completion set up here, and in the course completion area, again, it's a little bit different than the activity completion, right? Because at the activity level, you're setting things up and saying, you want this page resource to be completed, and you do it one at a time. At the course completion level, you can say, okay, I want the students to, be able to know what they've, how far they are in terms of course completion by way of this course completion block. So let me, and I'm going to jump around a little bit here. I'm going to go to my sandbox site as a student. And if I go into course tools here, you can see course completion status is not yet started. There's activity completion on 5 activities, but it's not listed out here. So those 5 activities right here are the quizzes. So quiz on content and resources, quiz on activities and assessments. So again, you can set this up so that if you want the students to see another level of activity completion by way of this block, you can do this. And you can make it so that, again, you can choose everything if you wanted to, so that the student has to complete all of the activities essentially to know that this is completed. But again, you might say, well, I've set the activity completion level at, kind of at the granular level here where they can see progress 2 of 2, but, they don't have to see all, I believe it's 34 activities for course completion status. I just want them to complete the quizzes.
Mike, I think that you can click on more details option, and there you go.
There we go. Yep. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, and this, as you can see, that takes it a step further, and you can actually see what activities need to be completed for that course completion progress, and what the status is. So again, going back to the idea that you talked about, the question that you had earlier, Kim, is if you want the student to see the list kind of the way you see it as the instructor, this is one of the ways to do it. So yeah, again, I think that this is a nice first. And again, you can set it at, do you want to choose all of the resources and have them listed out, or do you only want the quizzes? So just something to keep in mind here. Any questions about, so, well, let me show you, let me go back here for a quick moment and show you the difference of, so if I go into course administration as the instructor and I go to reports, there is a course participation and I'm sorry, there's a course completion report here. So I can see in terms of course completion, this is a different level of completion in terms of the activity completion. So you can see when it's turned on at the course level, I can see course completion and activity completion. What I wanted to mention here is if I went into my interactive online SNAP course, I don't have course completion set up. And if I go to reports, I don't see course completion. And that's because the course completion setting is not set up there. So I just wanted to kind of point out there that it is voluntary and you're not required to use that course completion, just like with the activity completion. But if you do, it adds that another layer of reports for the instructor. Any questions or comments about the course completion there? Again, not hearing a whole lot there. So again, yeah, that's really everything that I wanted to talk about in terms of general idea of, you know, using activity completion, using restrict access, and using course completion for student retention. Again, hopefully you guys have kind of seen, you know, the general idea of, you know, if we're to engage, if we want to engage the students a little bit more and give them that sense of accomplishment, there's a lot of tools that we can use to do that. And I think when we put all these tools together, I think it gives the students a really good learning experience and makes them want to come back for more because they're able to see, hey, you know what? Again, I had a really great experience with this course. I wasn't pushed through it. It wasn't disorganized. I knew when I had to complete what, and you know, I knew once the course was completed that it was completed because of you know, the report that I see. So again, I as a student, if let's say I'm taking an elective course at one of your guys' higher ed institutions, I might say, you know what, I had a really good experience with that course. I'm going to take another course because I think that, you know, it really helped me understand that topic that I learned about, rather than taking a course with another institution that might not have that activity completion in progress, and it might not have that design set up, that, you know, the way we talked about there. So and thank you everybody for your time. You'll see a follow-up email and an invite for next week, and we'll definitely be in touch.